Single dad cleaned empty office building at night not knowing CEO's cameras were recording. He thought no one saw him whisper prayers to his little girl between mopping floors. But the cameras caught something so powerful, it would shake the entire company and change his life forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The old sedan's engine sputtered against the bitter wind as Ethan Cole pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. Streetlights cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, and above them, the Harper and Sloan buildings stretched toward the cloud-heavy sky like a giant made of steel and glass. "Almost there, sweetheart," Ethan said, glancing in the rearview mirror at Lily. His daughter's small face was illuminated by the dim glow of her booklight, her finger tracing the words on the well-worn pages. "Just one more page, Daddy?" Lily looked up with hopeful eyes, the same shade of warm brown as her mother's had been. "One more," he agreed, unable to resist her smile. He turned off the engine but left the key in the ignition to keep the heat running a little longer. The car's worn leather seats creaked as he shifted to face her. Lily's voice carried through the quiet car as she read, stumbling occasionally over the bigger words. "And the little match girl saw wonderful things in the flame." Her voice trailed off as she suppressed a small cough. Ethan's heart squeezed. Sarah had loved reading that story too, even though it always made her cry. 2 years had passed since cancer took her, but sometimes the grief felt as fresh as yesterday. He could still see her sitting in their old armchair, reading to Lily while the factory whistle blew in the distance. The factory. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. For 15 years, he'd worked his way up from the assembly line to foreman, proud of every promotion, every raise that helped build their modest life. Then came the closure announcement. 300 workers let go in one day, their jobs shipped overseas. The severance package had barely covered Sarah's remaining medical bills. "Ready to head in?" Ethan forced cheerfulness into his voice. "Got your homework in your backpack?" Lily nodded, carefully marking her place in the book. "And my sandwich. Peanut butter and honey, just like always." "That's my organized girl." Ethan stepped out into the wind, hurrying to open Lily's door. The cold bit through his thin jacket. He'd given his warmer coat to Goodwill last month when choosing between winter clothes and Lily's asthma medication. They hurried across the parking lot, their shadows stretching before them. The building's lobby was warm and bright, all polished marble and gleaming brass. Their footsteps echoed in the empty space. Night security nodded to them from behind the desk. They'd gotten used to seeing the quiet janitor and his daughter over the past few months. "Evening, Mr. Cole," the guard said. "Cold one tonight." "Sure is, Dave." Ethan guided Lily toward the service elevator. "Stay warm." The elevator creaked its way up to the 3rd floor, where the employee break room waited. Ethan had already arranged with his supervisor to let Lily stay there while he worked. It was either that or leave her home alone, and he couldn't bear the thought. "Here we go, sweetheart." Ethan helped Lily settle at one of the break room tables, laying out her homework and sandwich. The room smelled of old coffee and microwave popcorn, but it was clean and safe. "I'll check on you between floors, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." Lily pulled out her math worksheet. "I'll be good. You're always good." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, the cheap kind, but she never complained. Walking to the janitorial closet, Ethan tried not to think about how different this was from his days at the factory. There, he'd worn a tie, attended management meetings, made decisions that mattered. Here, he was invisible, just another shadow moving through empty halls after everyone important had gone home. But it was honest work, he reminded himself. His father had always said there was dignity in any job well done, and this job meant food on the table, rent paid, and medicine for Lily. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. The time clock waited on the wall, its digital display glowing red in the dim hallway. 6 p.m. 12 hours stretched ahead of him. Ethan pulled his time card from his pocket, the edges worn soft from handling. As he punched in, he noticed the security camera mounted in the corner. Its little red light blinked steadily, recording the empty halls. Sometimes he wondered what the footage showed. Just him, moving floor to floor, pushing his cart, emptying trash bins, and wiping away the day's fingerprints from glass doors. The mop and bucket waited in the supply closet, along with his cart of cleaning supplies. Everything had its place, labeled and organized. He might not be a foreman anymore, but he could still take pride in doing things right. "Let's make this place shine, sweetheart," he called to Lily, who looked up from her homework with a bright smile. The camera's red light flickered as Ethan wheeled his cart toward the first office suite. Unknown to him, in a different part of the building, someone was indeed watching, their finger hovering over the replay button of the security feed. The rhythmic swish of Ethan's mop echoed through the empty hallways of the 14th floor. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the corporate maze of cubicles and corner offices. His muscles ached from 3 hours of continuous cleaning, but he kept moving. The floors wouldn't scrub themselves. He paused to check his watch. 9:45 p.m. Time to look in on Lily. The janitor's lounge wasn't much, just a cramped room with a few metal chairs and a mini fridge. But he'd made it cozy for her with a small pillow and her favorite blanket from home. Lily lay curled up on 2 chairs pushed together, her math homework spread across her lap, fast asleep. Ethan smiled at the sight of her peaceful face, gently moving the papers aside and tucking the blanket more securely around her shoulders. Her dark curls, so much like her mother's, spilled across the makeshift pillow he'd fashioned from his spare uniform shirt. A muffled sound from the stairwell caught his attention. At first, he thought it might be the wind whistling through the building's ventilation system, but then he heard it again. Something between a cough and a wheeze. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and headed toward the heavy metal door. The stairwell was always chilly, the concrete walls amplifying the winter draft that crept through the building. As he pushed open the door, the beam of his flashlight revealed a hunched figure sitting on the landing between floors. An older man, probably in his 60s, huddled against the wall. His thin jacket was more holes than fabric, and a veteran's cap sat askew on his gray hair. The man blinked in the sudden light, raising a weathered hand to shield his eyes. "I'm sorry." The man's voice was rough but gentle. "I just needed to get out of the wind for a while." "I'll go." "Wait," Ethan said softly, lowering the flashlight. "It's freezing out there." He thought of his own father, who'd served in the military. The man's boots, though worn, were military issue. Without hesitation, Ethan shrugged off his warm work jacket. "Here," he held it out. "This will help." The man shook his head. "I can't take your coat, son." "Please," Ethan insisted. "I've got another one in my locker." This wasn't exactly true, but he could manage without it. He draped the jacket over the man's shoulders. "I've got some dinner left too," Ethan added, remembering the sandwich and soup thermos in his lunch bag. "Give me a minute." He hurried back to the lounge, careful not to wake Lily as he retrieved his lunch bag. Returning to the stairwell, he found the older man had put on the jacket, his shoulders relaxing slightly in its warmth. "It's not much," Ethan said, pulling out half a turkey sandwich and the thermos of homemade soup, "but it's still warm." The man's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the food. "God bless you," he whispered. "There's an empty corner office down the hall," Ethan said. "It's warmer there, and no one will bother you." He helped the veteran to his feet, supporting him as they walked slowly to the vacant room. "You can rest here tonight." The man settled into a corner, wrapped in Ethan's jacket. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not many people would. Get some rest." Ethan cut him off gently, not wanting to embarrass either of them with gratitude. "I've got floors to finish." As he closed the office door quietly behind him, Ethan didn't notice the small red light blinking on the rection. Security camera mounted in the hallway ceiling. 14 floors up, in the security monitoring room, guard Thomas Martinez straightened in his chair as movement caught his eye. He zoomed in on the feed from the 14th floor, watching as the night janitor, Cole, he remembered from the log sheet, helped someone into one of the empty offices. Meanwhile, across town in her penthouse apartment, Amelia Harper's phone buzzed with a security alert. She almost ignored it, her attention focused on tomorrow's board meeting preparations, but something made her pick up the device. The app showed her a live feed from the building's security cameras. She tapped the notification, and the footage began to play. Her manicured finger hovered over the screen as she watched the scene unfold. The janitor discovering the homeless man, giving up his own coat, sharing his meal. Such simple acts of kindness, yet they stirred something deep within her. Amelia pressed the replay button, her eyes fixed on the screen as the scene played out again. Who was this man who would give away his own warmth and food without hesitation? In all her years running Harper and Sloan, she'd never paid much attention to the cleaning staff. But something about this one. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Amelia Harper's penthouse office, casting long shadows across her mahogany desk. She sat in her leather executive chair, her manicured fingers hovering over the tablet screen before her. The security footage from last night played again, the 4th time she'd watched it this morning. On the screen, the janitor, Ethan Cole, according to his employee file, moved with quiet purpose through the stairwell. His actions were simple yet profound, offering his jacket, sharing his meal, speaking softly to the homeless veteran. The camera's grainy footage couldn't mask the genuine kindness in his gestures. Amelia's throat tightened. She touched the small framed photo on her desk, its silver frame worn from years of handling. In it, a man in a gray maintenance uniform smiled broadly, his eyes crinkling at the corners, her father James, on his last day of work before the cancer took him. "You would have liked him, Dad," she whispered, her perfectly composed facade cracking slightly. "He has your way about him." The memory of her father's hands, roughened by years of honest work, came rushing back. How he'd come home smelling of industrial cleaner and floor wax, yet never complained. How he'd saved every spare penny to buy her school books, telling her, "Your mind is your ticket out, sweetheart." Amelia straightened in her chair, smoothing her silk blouse, a reflexive gesture whenever emotion threatened to overwhelm her carefully constructed professional image. 25 years of climbing the corporate ladder had taught her to keep sentiment locked away, but something about this janitor's simple act of kindness had wedged itself under her armor. She pressed the intercom button. "Sandra, come in here, please." Her assistant appeared moments later, tablet in hand. "Yes, Miss Harper? I want daily reports on the night shift janitor, Ethan Cole. Have security forward any relevant footage to my private server, but keep this between us." Sandra nodded efficiently. "Of course. Anything specific you're looking for?" Amelia paused, considering. "Just his interactions. With his daughter, with others. Don't interfere, just observe." After Sandra left, Amelia found herself watching the footage again. This time, she focused on the little girl in the break room, doing homework by lamplight while her father worked. The child's determined concentration, the way she looked up whenever her father passed by, it stirred something deep in Amelia's chest. She remembered sitting in her father's break room as a girl, surrounded by mop buckets and cleaning supplies, doing her own homework while he worked. The pride in his voice when he'd tell his co-workers, "My girl's going to college someday." He hadn't lived to see her graduate, to witness her meteoric rise from accounting intern to CEO. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls, but Amelia's thoughts kept drifting back to the footage. As evening approached, she found herself opening the security app on her tablet again. The night shift was starting. Through the cameras, she watched Ethan Cole arrive, his daughter in tow. He moved through his routine with careful attention to detail, humming softly as he worked the brass railings to a mirror shine. His hands, like her father's had been, were strong and sure, treating every task as if it mattered. The familiar ache of loss washed over her as she watched. "You remind me of him," she whispered to the screen, her words falling soft in the emptiness of her office. In all her years of success, she'd never felt more like that little girl in the break room, watching her father work with quiet dignity. The same dignity she saw now in Ethan Cole, a man who gave his jacket to a stranger and sang to his daughter between cleaning floors, unaware that anyone was watching. The brass railings gleamed under his care, catching the building's security lights. Amelia touched her tablet screen, where Ethan's reflection showed in the polished metal. For a moment, she could almost see her father's face there instead, smiling with that same humble pride in a job well done. She sat back in her chair, suddenly aware of the tears threatening to spill. With practiced composure, she dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, careful not to smudge her makeup. But she didn't close the security feed. Instead, she watched as Ethan moved through the building, quietly tending to tasks that most people never noticed, but that made everyone's work possible. On her desk, her father's photo seemed to watch with her, a silent witness to the unexpected connection between the powerful CEO and the night shift janitor who had unwittingly awakened memories she'd thought were safely buried in the past. 3 nights had passed since Ethan's encounter with the homeless veteran. The evening air had grown colder, but inside the towering office building, Ethan worked with his usual quiet determination. His footsteps echoed through the empty hallway as he pushed his cleaning cart, stopping at a flickering fluorescent light that had been bothering him all week. "Hold on, sweetheart," he called softly to Lily, who sat cross-legged nearby with her math homework spread across her lap. "Just need to fix this real quick." Lily looked up from her multiplication tables, her small face brightening. "Can I watch, Daddy?" "Sure can." Ethan grabbed his stepladder from the cart, unfolding it carefully. "But remember our safety rules. Stay 3 big steps back," Lily recited, scooting backwards on the polished floor. With practiced movements, Ethan climbed the ladder and examined the light fixture. His hands, calloused from years of factory work, gentle, touched the tube, A slight twist, a careful adjustment, and the flickering stop. The hallway now bathed in steady, warm light. Magic! Lily clapped. Ethan chuckled. Not magic, sweetie. Just needs a little care sometimes. That's all. Moving on to the reception area, Ethan began his usual cleaning routine. The massive desk, shaped like a crescent moon, dominated the space. As he wiped down its surface, his cloth passed over a small wooden plaque. The words carved into it caught his eye. Work hard, stay humble. A small smile tugged at his lips. Those words reminded him of something his father used to say. Pride don't put food on the table, son. Hard work does. Meanwhile, 42 floors above, Amelia Harper sat in her dimly lit office. The security feed showed Ethan's methodical work, his gentle interactions with his daughter, the care he took with every task. Something about his quiet dignity touched a deep chord within her. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. Inside, she'd placed a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Thank you for showing us what real value looks like. Alongside it, she slipped in a $100 grocery store gift card. She debated the amount, not wanting to offend his pride, but knowing from his file that he was struggling to make ends meet. Using her private elevator, Amelia made her way down to the janitorial floor. The locker room was empty this time of night. Most cleaning staff worked different shifts. She slipped the envelope through the vent slots of locker 247, Ethan's assigned space. Later that night, during his break, Ethan headed to his locker to retrieve Lily's medicine. The envelope fluttered to the floor as he opened the door. "What's this?" he muttered, bending to pick it up. The paper felt expensive between his fingers, nothing like the usual company memos. Opening it carefully, he read the note. The gift card slipped into his palm, its green and gold surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His throat tightened as he stared at the amount. "Someone must have dropped this," he said quietly, looking around the empty locker room. For the next hour, he asked every maintenance worker he encountered if they'd lost something valuable. Each shook their head. He even checked with security, but no one had reported anything missing. By the end of his shift, the envelope still sat in his pocket, feeling both heavy and light at the same time. As he drove home with a sleeping Lily in the back seat, he thought about the grocery store near their apartment, the one where he usually had to carefully count every dollar, often putting items back when the total grew too high. The next evening, their small kitchen table held more food than it had in weeks. Fresh fruit, real meat, vegetables that weren't from the reduced section. Lily's eyes grew wide at the sight. "Can we say grace, Daddy?" she asked, reaching for his hand. "Of course, baby." They bowed their heads, and Lily's sweet voice filled their tiny apartment. "Dear God, thank you for this food and for Daddy working so hard. And thank you for the nice person who gave us the present. Please bless them extra special. Amen." "Amen," Ethan echoed softly, his own eyes growing moist. Back in the office building, in a dark security room, cameras whirred silently. On multiple screens, the footage captured Ethan's earlier movements, his discovery of the envelope, his honest attempts to find its owner, and finally, his heartfelt prayer of thanks before starting his night shift. In one corner of the frame, if someone looked closely, they might have seen Amelia Harper standing in the shadows of her office, watching the screens, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. Thunder rumbled outside the Harper and Sloan building as rain pelted against the windows with increasing intensity. The storm had been building all evening, turning the city streets below into rivers of reflected neon and headlights. Ethan wheeled his cart down the dimly lit hallway of the 14th floor, the squeaking wheels echoing through the empty space like a lonely metronome. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered occasionally, casting shifting shadows across the polished floor he'd spent hours perfecting. He'd packed extra snacks for Lily tonight, fresh fruit and vegetables from the grocery store, thanks to the mysterious gift card. The crisp apples and organic juice boxes felt like small treasures in his worn canvas lunch bag. For the first time in months, he'd been able to buy food without calculating every penny, without choosing between his daughter's nutrition and the electric bill. The simple joy of placing fresh strawberries in his cart without checking the price had brought tears to his eyes. The break room door burst open with such force it slammed against the wall, and Carl Benson stumbled out, his face flushed crimson and eyes narrowed to angry slits. The supervisor's tie hung loose around his thick neck like a noose, and the sharp smell of alcohol clung to him like cheap cologne mixed with desperation. His usually pressed shirt was wrinkled and stained, and his graying hair stuck up at odd angles where he'd been running his hands through it. "Cole!" Carl's voice boomed through the corridor, reverberating off the glass office doors. "Get in here, now!" Ethan paused, his weathered hands tightening on the cart handle. He glanced toward the janitor's lounge where Lily was working on her spelling homework, her small form hunched over the table in concentration. Her tongue poked out slightly as she carefully formed each letter, the way her mother used to do when she was thinking hard. The sight always made his heart ache with love and loss. "Just a minute, Mr. Benson. Let me check on." "I said now." Carl's words slurred slightly at the edges, his voice carrying the dangerous undertone of a man looking for a fight. With a quiet sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, Ethan followed his supervisor into the break room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with an electrical buzz, casting harsh shadows across Carl's weathered face and highlighting every line of bitterness carved there by years of disappointment. The man stood by the open refrigerator like a predator guarding its territory, pointing at Ethan's brown paper bag lunch with a thick, accusatory finger. "Want to explain this?" Carl grabbed the bag with rough hands, pulling out an apple and organic juice box as if they were evidence of a crime. The apple gleamed under the harsh lights, its red skin perfect and unblemished. Pretty fancy stuff for a night janitor making minimum wage. "Sir?" Ethan kept his voice steady and respectful, though his heart began to race like a trapped bird against his ribs. "Don't play dumb with me, Cole." Carl slammed the fridge door shut with enough force to rattle the condiment bottles inside. The sound echoed through the small room like a gunshot. Word gets around in a building like this. Someone left an envelope in the locker room, $100 gift card to Murphy's Market. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger at Ethan's chest hard enough to leave a bruise. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what you did?" "No, sir. The envelope was anonymous. I found it in my locker and save it." Carl's face reddened further, veins standing out on his forehead like rivers on a map. Nobody just gives away money like that. Not in the real world. "What did you do? Steal it from someone's desk? Maybe take it from petty cash when no one was looking?" "I would never. 23 years I've worked here." Carl cut him off, pacing the small room like a caged animal. His footsteps were heavy and uneven, leaving scuff marks on the polished linoleum. "Started in maintenance myself, just like you. Cleaned toilets, emptied trash, got treated like dirt by everyone in fancy suits. You know what I learned in all those years? Nothing comes free in this world. Nobody helps anybody unless they want something in return." Ethan stood quietly, hands clasped in front of him in a gesture of patient humility. Through the break room window, lightning flashed across the dark sky, illuminating the rain-streaked glass and the city sprawling below. The storm seemed to be growing stronger, matching the tempest brewing in this small room 14 floors above the street. In her top-floor office, surrounded by awards and photographs of corporate achievements, Amelia Harper leaned closer to her computer screen. The security feed showed the confrontation unfolding in grainy black and white, but she could see every detail of Carl's aggressive posture and Ethan's calm restraint. Her manicured fingers hovered over her phone, tempted to call security and end this before it went too far, but she held back. This was her fault. Her attempt at anonymous kindness had backfired spectacularly, like a good deed that had turned to poison in the wrong hands. Back in the break room, Carl continued his tirade, his voice rising with each accusation. "You've got everyone fooled with this humble single dad act, walking around here like some kind of saint, singing to yourself, fixing things that aren't even broken. Even got your kid here to sell the story, making everyone feel sorry for you." The mention of Lily made Ethan's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "Mr. Benson," he said, each word carefully measured, "I understand you're upset, but I haven't stolen anything. The gift card was left anonymously in my locker. I tried to find who it belonged to, asked around. Lies." Carl grabbed Ethan's lunch bag and dumped its contents onto the floor with violent satisfaction. Apples rolled across the linoleum like scattered dreams, and the juice box split open, sending orange liquid spreading in a sticky puddle. Thunder crashed outside, so loud it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. "You're fired, Cole. Clean out your locker and get out of my building. Please." Ethan's composure cracked slightly, his voice carrying a note of quiet desperation. "My daughter, she's only 7. It's a school night, and the storm. Should have thought about her before you started stealing from decent people." Carl's laugh was harsh and bitter, the sound of a man who'd forgotten what joy felt like. Maybe this'll teach her an important lesson about honest work and what happens when you try to take shortcuts. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides, his knuckles going white with the effort of restraint. Years of factory work had taught him how to swallow his pride, how to bend without breaking under pressure. He'd learned to absorb insults and unfairness the way a sponge absorbs water, protecting those he loved by keeping his anger locked away. "Can I at least finish my shift?" he asked quietly. "It's pouring outside, and Lily, out!" Carl roared, spittle flying from his lips. "Now, before I change my mind and call security to have them escort you and your kid out in handcuffs." In her office high above, Amelia's hand pressed against her mouth, watching the scene unfold with growing horror. The man on the screen, this quiet, dignified father who had shown such simple kindness to a stranger, was being destroyed because of her impulse to help. She had meant to acknowledge his goodness in some small way, to let him know that someone had noticed his compassion. Instead, she'd given a bitter, broken man ammunition to destroy an innocent family. Ethan knelt slowly, gathering the scattered food from his lunch with the same care he brought to everything he did. Each movement was deliberate and dignified, refusing to let Carl's cruelty strip away his grace. He placed everything back in the paper bag, even the broken juice box, then stood with quiet strength. "I'll get my daughter and go," he said, his voice carrying no trace of anger or resentment. "But Mr. Benson, I want you to know, I forgive you for this." Carl's face twisted into something ugly and raw. Those simple words seemed to hit him harder than any curse or threat could have. "Get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret." Ethan walked to the janitor's lounge, where Lily sat, surrounded by spelling worksheets, her pencil moving carefully across the paper. She looked up as he entered, her small face immediately concerned by the expression she saw there. Her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, seemed to see straight through to his heart. "Daddy, what's wrong? You look sad." "Pack up your books, sweetheart." Ethan managed a gentle smile, the kind that had comforted her through every storm and setback they'd faced together. "We need to head home early tonight, but it's raining really hard," Lily said, gathering her papers with careful precision. "And you're not done cleaning yet. Don't you still have 3 more floors?" "Sometimes things change unexpectedly, little one." Ethan helped her zip up her backpack, his large hands gentle on the small zipper. "But we'll be fine, sweetheart. Good people don't hide forever. Someone always sees the truth, even when it takes time." Thunder cracked again as they walked toward the elevator, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Lightning illuminated the windows, casting their shadows long and dark against the polished floor. In her office far above, Amelia watched them go, their figures small and vulnerable on her screen. Her hand pressed against the cold window as lightning illuminated the city below, and she could see her own reflection ghost-like in the glass. A woman who had everything except the courage to make things right. "You're right," she whispered into the empty office, guilt and determination warring in her chest, as another thunderclap shook the building to its very core. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one building in her heart. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Puddles from last night's storm reflected the cloudy sky as Amelia's town car pulled away from the Harper and Sloan building. She glanced at her phone, checking the security feed one last time before her flight. Everything seemed quiet. Ethan had finished his shift hours ago, leaving the floors gleaming as always. Carl Benson sat in his cramped office, nursing a hangover with black coffee. His bloodshot eyes kept darting to the grocery receipt he'd found in the break room trash. The numbers swam before him: fresh fruit, whole grain bread, milk, items he knew a janitor's salary couldn't easily afford. His jaw clenched as he reached for his phone. "Tell Cole to come in early today." He barked at the scheduling coordinator. Need to see him before his shift. The afternoon sun was setting when Ethan's old sedan pulled into the parking garage. Lily clutched her backpack, filled with homework and her favorite stuffed bear. "Why are we here so early, Daddy?" "Mr. Benson wants to talk to me, sweetheart." Ethan kept his voice steady, though worry gnawed at his stomach. "You can wait in the break room while I—" "No." Carl appeared in the garage doorway, arms crossed. "She stays with you. My office." "Now." Ethan took Lily's small hand in his, feeling her fingers trembling. They followed Carl through the empty hallways, their footsteps echoing against the polished floors Ethan had cleaned just hours before. Carl's office was a cluttered space that smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes. He slammed the door behind them, making Lily jump. "Sit down, Cole." Ethan remained standing, keeping Lily close. "What's this about, Mr. Benson?" Carl's laugh was harsh. "Playing innocent? That gift card you found? Pretty convenient timing, wasn't it? Right when you needed groceries." "Sir, I told you, it was left anonymously. I have the note right here." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out the bit carefully folded paper. Carl snatched it from his hands. Sure, anonymous. He held the note up to the fluorescent light. Probably printed it yourself. Think we're all stupid here, Cole? I didn't steal anything, Ethan said quietly, conscious of Lily's wide eyes watching. Check my record. I've never... Your record? Carl yanked open a drawer, pulling out Ethan's employee file. Let's see. Former factory foreman, laid off, desperate single dad. He sneered. Perfect setup for a sob story, isn't it? Lily pressed closer to her father's side. Daddy doesn't steal, she whispered. He helps people. Carl's face darkened. Helps himself, you mean? He held up the note and, with deliberate slowness, tore it into tiny pieces. The fragments fluttered to his desk like confetti. We don't need dishonest people here, Cole. You're fired. Clean out your locker. The words hung in the air like poison. Ethan felt Lily's hand tighten in his as tears welled in her eyes. Mr. Benson, please. I can prove. Get out. Carl pointed to the door. Before I call security. Ethan stood very still for a moment, his jaw working. Then he straightened his shoulders and looked down at his daughter. Come on, sweetheart. We're leaving. Lily's sobs echoed through the hallway as they walked to his locker. Ethan kept his movements steady, methodical, as he collected his few belongings, a spare uniform, a lunchbox, the family photo he'd taped inside the door. Each item went into a cardboard box with quiet dignity. Where will we go? Lily hiccuped as they walked toward the exit. Ethan balanced the box in one arm, holding her hand with the other. We'll figure it out, baby. We always do. His voice was gentle, though his eyes burned with unshed tears. They passed the security desk where he'd worked so many nights. The camera above tracked their movement, its red light blinking steadily. Ethan didn't look up. He pushed through the revolving door into the chilly evening air, leaving behind the gleaming floors and empty offices he'd tended with such care. Hours later, Amelia's heels clicked across the lobby as she returned from her conference. Her phone buzzed with notifications, but something made her pause at the security desk. Show me today's footage, she ordered. The guard pulled up the recordings. Amelia watched in growing horror as the scene unfolded. Carl's confrontation, the torn note, Ethan's quiet departure with his crying daughter. Her hand flew to her mouth as understanding dawned. What have I done? She whispered, watching Ethan's final exit play out on the screen. The gift meant to honor his kindness had instead cost him everything. The camera's unblinking eye recorded her devastation as she realized the weight of unintended consequences. Outside, the city lights flickered on, casting long shadows through the empty lobby where a good man had walked away, leaving only silence and the echo of a child's tears. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Ethan and Lily's one-bedroom apartment, casting pale rectangles across the scuffed hardwood floor. The apartment felt smaller each day, as if the walls were slowly closing in on their hopes. Bills spread across their small kitchen table like fallen autumn leaves, a chaotic mess of white envelopes and colored notices that seemed to multiply overnight. Past due notices in red ink, final warnings stamped in bold letters, disconnection threats that made Ethan's stomach twist into knots. He rubbed his tired eyes with the heels of his palms, trying to make the numbers add up differently than they had the night before. And the night before that. The calculator beside the stack of bills showed the same harsh reality no matter how many times he pressed the buttons. Not enough. Never enough. Daddy, can I have cereal? Lily asked from her perch on the worn couch. Her favorite stuffed bear, Mr. Patches, with his missing eye and frayed ears clutched tight against her chest. Her voice carried that sweet morning softness that always made his heart both soar and break at the same time. Ethan's heart clenched as he looked at his daughter, still in her two small pajamas with the faded cartoon characters. He opened the fridge with the same dread he felt every morning, already knowing what he'd find. Nearly empty except for half a carton of milk that would expire tomorrow and some wilted vegetables he'd picked up from the discount bin. The cabinets weren't much better bare shelves that echoed when he opened the doors. One lonely box of generic cornflakes sat on the middle shelf, its contents rattling like dried leaves when he shook it. Sure, sweetheart, but let's save some for tomorrow too, okay? He poured her a small bowl, measuring each flake as if it were precious grain, adding just enough milk to soften the cereal without drowning it. The milk swirled white against the golden flakes, and he said a silent prayer of gratitude that there was anything at all to give her. While Lily ate at the little card table they used for meals, swinging her bare feet that didn't quite reach the floor, Ethan opened his laptop, another past due payment, looming like a storm cloud on the horizon. The screen flickered to life with a wheeze from the aging hard drive, and he scanned job listings with the methodical persistence of a man running out of options. Factory work, his old expertise, was scarce in a town where plants had closed one by one like dominoes falling. The few openings that existed required late shifts he couldn't work with Lily to care for, or demanded certifications he couldn't afford to obtain. Janitorial positions were temporary contracts or paid even less than his last job, barely enough to cover gas money. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, searching for hope in a sea of requirements he couldn't meet. "Dear God," he whispered, too soft for Lily to hear over the gentle clink of her spoon against the bowl. "I'm trying to keep faith here, but we could really use some help right now. Any kind of help." Across town, high above the morning traffic in her penthouse office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, Amelia Harper stared at her phone like it might hold the answers to questions she was afraid to ask. Sunlight streamed through the glass, warming the expensive hardwood and leather furniture that surrounded her, but she felt cold inside. She'd spent the morning watching old security footage of Ethan working his careful attention to detail, the way he'd fix broken desk chairs and replace burnt-out bulbs without being asked, the gentle way he'd guide Lily through her homework during his breaks. The guilt of causing his firing ate at her like acid, keeping her awake at night and stealing her appetite during the day. She reached for the office phone with hands that trembled slightly, then pulled back. Reached again. This time, she picked up the receiver and dialed HR, making sure to block her number first. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for someone to answer. "This is regarding a potential hire for the warehouse maintenance position," she said, deepening her voice slightly and adopting a more formal tone than usual. "I'd like to recommend someone with excellent experience, Ethan Cole. He has a strong background in factory maintenance and operations." The HR manager, Sandra Lopez, pulled up Ethan's file on her computer, her fingers clicking across the keyboard. "The janitor who was just terminated for that gift card incident? Check his previous employment history," Amelia insisted, gripping the phone tighter. 10 years as a factory foreman at Meridian Manufacturing. Expert mechanical knowledge, problem-solving skills, team leadership experience. The warehouse desperately needs someone who can maintain equipment and handle complex repairs. His janitorial position was a temporary situation after the plant closure. Sandra scrolled through the file, her eyebrows raising as she read. His qualifications are impressive, much higher than typical for someone in custodial work. "Today, please," Amelia added, then hung up quickly before her voice could betray her. Back in the apartment, Lily worked on her homework at the card table while Ethan made another round of calls from a list he'd compiled over the past few days. No luck. Each conversation ended the same way they'd keep his resume on file. They'd call if anything opened up. They appreciated his interest. Empty promises that felt like doors slamming shut one by one. He'd have to start selling things soon, his tools maybe, though that would make finding work even harder. The toolbox in the closet represented years of collecting quality equipment, each wrench and screwdriver a small investment in his future that now looked increasingly bleak. The afternoon stretched long and quiet, broken only by the distant sounds of traffic and Lily's pencil scratching against paper. Ethan heated their last can of soup for lunch, splitting it carefully between 2 bowls and adding water to make it stretch further. The chicken noodle soup was thin and pale, but Lily didn't complain. She just smiled and thanked him like it was a feast prepared by the finest chef, her gratitude shining in her eyes. "Want to see my drawing, Daddy?" She held up a crayon picture of their old house, the one they'd lost after Sarah died, and the medical bills had swallowed everything they owned. Blue sky filled with puffy white clouds, green grass dotted with yellow flowers, a yellow sun with a cheerful face, smiling down on a little white house with red shutters. It was perfect in the way only a child's drawing could be, full of hope and memory and love. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the coconut scent of her dollar store shampoo that reminded him of tropical vacations they'd never be able to take. "Maybe we'll have a house like that again someday." "I know we will," Lily said with the complete confidence that only 7-year-olds possessed. "I asked God for one last night in my prayers, and for you to find a good job, and for Mr. Peterson downstairs to feel better. His cough sounds really bad." Ethan's phone rang just after 6 o'clock, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet apartment like a bell. An unfamiliar number appeared on the cracked screen. He almost let it go to voicemail, tired of collection calls and automated messages about past due accounts. But something made him answer, maybe desperation, maybe hope, maybe just the look of trust in Lily's eyes. "Mr. Cole, this is Sandra Lopez from Harper & Sloan Human Resources. We have an opening in our warehouse maintenance department that matches your experience perfectly. Would you be interested in coming in for an interview?" Ethan sat down hard in the kitchen chair, the plastic creaking under his weight. His heart hammered so loudly, he was sure Sandra could hear it through the phone. Yes, absolutely, but I should mention I was just let go from the janitorial staff there." "We're fully aware of your recent position with the cleaning crew," Sandra said smoothly, her voice warm and professional. "However, we're much more interested in your decade of factory maintenance experience at Meridian. The warehouse position requires someone with your specific skill set, equipment, repair, preventive maintenance, troubleshooting complex mechanical systems. The salary would be significantly better than your previous role with us, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement. When can you come in?" Ethan's hand shook as he fumbled for a pen, nearly dropping it twice before managing to write down the interview time on the back of an envelope. His vision blurred slightly, and he realized he was holding his breath. After hanging up, he sat in stunned silence, staring at the phone as if it might disappear and take the miracle with it. "What is it, Daddy?" Lily had abandoned her homework and was standing beside his chair, her small hand touching his arm with gentle concern. "Was it good news? You look funny." He scooped her up in a tight hug, spinning her around the small kitchen until she giggled with delight, her laughter filling the apartment like music. "Maybe prayers do get answered after all, sweetheart. Maybe they really do." In her office, 30 floors above the city, Amelia Harper watched the warehouse security feed one last time before heading home. The maintenance bay where Ethan would work, if he took the job and performed well in the interview, appeared clean and well lit on her monitor. Dignified workspace with modern equipment and proper lighting. A place where his skills would be valued, where he could support his daughter and rebuild the life that had been torn apart by circumstances beyond his control. She reached for the monitor's power button, her finger hesitating just a moment above the switch. Through the static-filled image, she could see the empty workbenches and tool cabinets, waiting for someone who would appreciate the opportunity. "You deserve so much better than what life has given you," she whispered to the screen and turned off the feed. The warehouse hummed with morning activity as forklifts beeped their warning signals and workers called out to each other across the vast concrete floors. The sound echoed off metal rafters high above, creating a symphony of honest labor that filled every corner of the cavernous space. Ethan adjusted his navy work shirt, running his fingers over the Harper & Sloan logo that still felt crisp and new against his chest. The building wasn't fancy like the gleaming office tower downtown where he'd once pushed a cleaning cart through marble hallways, just honest steel beams and poured concrete, filled with the satisfying sounds of real work getting done by real people. "Hey, new guy," called Marcus, a gray-haired foreman whose weathered hands spoke of 3 decades spent coaxing life from reluctant machinery. His voice carried the easy authority of someone who'd earned respect through years of showing up and getting things done. "Got another broken conveyor belt over in Section C. 3rd one this week. Think you can take a look?" Ethan nodded, already reaching for his well-worn toolbox with the practiced motion of a man who'd spent years solving problems with his hands. On it. The familiar weight of tools in his grip felt like coming home after a long journey. After just a week in this place, he'd found his rhythm again, the steady pulse of meaningful work that had sustained him through his factory days before everything fell apart. The morning sun streamed through high industrial windows, casting long rectangles of golden light across the workspace as he knelt beside the silent conveyor. His hands moved with sure, steady confidence over the machinery, fingers reading the metal like braille. The machines here spoke a language he understood from years of listening, their squeaks and rattles telling stories of worn bearings, misaligned gears, and the small failures that could cascade into bigger problems if left untended. Other workers passed by throughout the morning, offering friendly nods or stopping to chat about weekend plans and family news. The atmosphere felt different here than anywhere he'd worked in months, more like family than the cold corporate halls he'd cleaned in the dead of night while security cameras tracked his every move. Here, people looked him in the eye when they spoke. Here, his name mattered more than his job title. "Your daughter gets settled in her new school, okay?" Marcus asked, handing Ethan a socket wrench and settling back on his heels to watch the repair work. His question carried genuine interest, the kind that came from understanding what it meant to worry about a child's happiness. "Yeah, she did." Ethan's face lit up with the soft smile that always appeared when he talked about Lily. Teacher says she's making friends already. Drew pictures for half the class on her first day. That's Lily, for you never meets a stranger she can't win over with crayon drawings and knock-knock jokes. As if the universe wanted to prove his point about strangers, a woman in simple dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater approached their work area. She moved with quiet purpose, watching him work with the kind of focused interest that seemed unusual for a casual observer. Something about her struck him as familiar, though Ethan couldn't quite place where he might have seen her before. Maybe she worked in one of the offices upstairs. That's impressive, she said, gesturing toward where he'd already restored half the conveyor system to smooth operation. Her voice carried an educated cadence that suggested she was used to boardrooms rather than factory floors. Most people would have called an outside maintenance service for something like this. I am maintenance, Ethan chuckled, wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag. But you're right, this is more like what I used to do at the factory before it closed down. Feels good to be back at real mechanical work instead of just cleaning up after other people's messes. The woman introduced herself as Amy, explaining that she was conducting some kind of morale and efficiency study for upper management. Something about the way she held herself seemed carefully composed, like she was maintaining a specific posture or playing a particular role. But her smile reached her eyes in a way that felt genuine. When she spoke, there was a warmth beneath the professional exterior that reminded him of teachers he'd liked as a kid. Mind if I observe while you work? I'm curious about the actual process involved in keeping this operation running smoothly. Ethan shrugged, already turning back to the machinery. Sure, though I have to warn you, it's not very exciting to watch. Mostly just listening to what the machine's trying to tell you and giving it what it needs. He walked her through each step as he worked, explaining how he'd learned to feel vibrations through metal, to hear the difference between healthy mechanical sounds and the subtle warnings that preceded breakdowns. She asked smart questions that showed she was actually paying attention, not just going through the motions of corporate oversight. During his lunch break, Ethan pulled out the peanut butter and jelly sandwich he'd packed that morning and claimed one of the plastic chairs at the break room's round table. The room smelled of coffee and the lingering aroma of someone's microwave leftovers. Amy joined him without invitation, her own lunch looking surprisingly modest for someone who worked in corporate consulting, just a simple salad in a plain container, nothing fancy or expensive. How long have you been raising your daughter alone? She asked softly, her question cutting through the casual small talk like a gentle knife. There was something in her tone that suggested personal experience with loss. Ethan paused mid-bite, surprised by the directness of her question, but not offended by it. Something about this woman invited honesty. Going on 2 years now. My wife, Sarah, she got sick pretty fast. Cancer doesn't give you much time to prepare. He took a steadying breath, the familiar ache settling in his chest. But Lily keeps me going. Kids are a lot stronger than we give them credit for. She teaches me something new about courage every single day. Amy nodded slowly, something sad and knowing flickering across her carefully composed features. My father raised me alone too, actually. He worked as a janitor for most of my childhood. Taught me more about real dignity and honest work than any business school ever could. Her voice carried a note of regret, as if she'd forgotten those lessons somewhere along the way and was just now remembering them. The afternoon passed in a blur of productive work. Ethan fixed 3 more pieces of equipment, showing Amy how small problems, a loose belt here, a misaligned sensor there, could snowball into major breakdowns if left unaddressed. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, but seemed more interested in watching the workers themselves, how they helped each other solve problems, shared tools without being asked, kept the massive warehouse operation running like a well-oiled machine through cooperation and mutual respect. You know what I love about this place? Ethan said as he tightened the last bolt on a packaging unit, his voice carrying the satisfaction of another job completed properly. Everything's real here. When something's broken, you fix it. When someone needs help, you help them. When the work's done right, you can see the results. Simple as that. Amy's carefully maintained professional expression softened into something more genuine. Not like the corporate world upstairs? Never been up there, Ethan laughed, a sound free of bitterness despite everything he'd been through. But I used to clean their offices at night in the downtown building. Let's just say I prefer it down here with the machines and the people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. At least the machines are honest about their problems. They tell you exactly what's wrong if you know how to listen. As his shift wound toward its end, Ethan wiped his hands clean on a shop rag and turned to face Amy, who had spent the entire day observing his work with an attention that seemed unusual for a routine corporate study. Thanks for listening today. Most corporate types don't take much interest in what actually keeps this place running. Nice to meet someone who cares about more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. You remind me of someone I used to know, she said quietly, gathering her notes and purse with movements that seemed slower than necessary. There was something wistful and almost vulnerable in her voice that made Ethan look at her twice, trying to read the emotion that had crept past her professional guard. But before he could find the right words to respond, she was already heading for the exit, her footsteps echoing softly against the concrete floor as she disappeared into the maze of warehouse aisles. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the neighborhood park as Ethan guided Lily toward the playground. Her small hand felt warm in his, and her pink sneakers kicked up tiny puffs of dust from the gravel path. After weeks of stress and uncertainty, the simple joy of a Saturday morning felt like a gift. "Look, Daddy, the swings!" Lily pointed at the old playground equipment, her face lighting up with excitement. The metal frame had seen better days, with chipped paint and rust spots showing its age. Ethan noticed right away that one of the swings hung crooked, its chain twisted and caught. A yellow caution tape wrapped around it kept children away, but he could see the disappointment on several young faces as they crowded around the working swings. "Hold on, sweetheart." He reached for the tool belt in his backpack, the same one he'd started carrying everywhere since his factory days. "Let's see if we can fix this." Lily clapped her hands. "You're gonna make it better?" "That's the plan." Ethan smiled, pulling out his wrench and pliers. A couple of curious kids gathered around as he examined the chain. "Can you really fix it, mister?" a small boy asked, his eyes wide with hope. "We'll sure try," Ethan replied, already working the seized links loose. The familiar feeling of metal under his fingers brought back memories of the factory floor, but this time, the work felt lighter somehow. Across the street, Amelia Harper slowed her silver Mercedes to a stop. She'd been heading to a charity board meeting when a flash of familiar pink caught her eye, the same color as the backpack she'd noticed at the warehouse. There was no mistaking that sweet face. It was Lily Cole, perched on a nearby bench while her father worked on the playground equipment. Amelia watched as Ethan's capable hands made quick work of the repair. His movements were precise and careful, just like when he fixed the warehouse machinery. But here, surrounded by sunshine and children's laughter, he seemed different, more at peace. Within 15 minutes, the swing hung straight and true. Ethan tested it carefully, then removed the caution tape. The waiting children cheered, forming an eager line. "All yours, kids," he said with a gentle smile. "Just be careful, okay?" Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Can I have a turn too, Daddy?" "Of course, Princess. Hop on." Amelia's hands tightened on her steering wheel as she watched Ethan push his daughter on the newly fixed swing. Lily's laughter carried across the park, pure and bright, like silver bells. It was the kind of sound that made the world feel right again. Later, as the morning warmed, Ethan bought 2 ice cream cones from a vendor's cart. He and Lily sat on a bench, vanilla ice cream dripping onto their fingers as they talked and giggled together. "You've got some on your nose?" Ethan chuckled, dabbing at Lily's face with a napkin. "So do you," she giggled back, reaching up to touch his nose with her sticky fingers. From her car, Amelia felt her throat tighten. She remembered similar moments with her own father, before success and ambition had filled her days instead. He'd worked as hard as Ethan did, always with the same quiet dignity. When was the last time she'd laughed like that, without worry about appearances or corporate politics? A church bell rang in the distance, its deep tones rolling across the morning air. Amelia realized she was already late for her meeting, but she couldn't bring herself to drive away just yet. Instead, she closed her eyes and did something she hadn't done since her father's funeral. She prayed. "God," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself, "show me how to make things right." The words felt rusty with disuse, but somehow true. That evening, after a day filled with playground adventures and simple pleasures, Ethan helped Lily get ready for bed. Her room was small but cozy, decorated with her own artwork and a string of fairy lights they'd found at a yard sale. "Time for sleep, sweetheart," he said, pulling her well-worn quilt up to her chin. Lily's eyes were already heavy with sleep, but she reached for his hand. "Daddy?" "Yes. Princess? When you help people, like with the swing today." She paused, her voice soft and thoughtful. "It's like Mommy's still here." Ethan felt tears well up in his eyes. He remembered Sarah's gentle heart, how she'd always found ways to help others, even when they had little themselves. He wiped his eyes quickly, not wanting Lily to see. "Your mommy would be so proud of you," he managed to say, kissing her forehead. Outside the apartment window, the city lights blurred through a gentle rain, each droplet carrying a reflection of street lamps and store signs. The quiet patter against the glass felt like a lullaby, wrapping father and daughter in its peaceful rhythm. The warehouse hummed with activity as morning sunlight filtered through dusty windows. Ethan Cole wiped sweat from his forehead, studying the broken conveyor belt that had halted operations in Loading Bay 3. A small crowd of workers gathered around, their faces showing a mix of concern and curiosity. "Been dead since Thursday," Mike, the shift supervisor, explained. "Already called 2 repair companies. They want 3 days and thousands of dollars." He shook his head. "Corporate's gonna have a fit." Ethan knelt beside the machinery, his weathered hands moving across the metal frame. The familiar scent of grease and rubber brought him back to his factory days. "Mind if I take a look?" "Be my guest," Mike replied, though his tone suggested he didn't expect much. As Ethan examined the mechanism, he noticed Amy, the friendly consultant he'd met last week, watching from near the office door. She wore simple slacks and a blouse today, blending in with the office staff. Something about her presence made him want to prove himself. "The tension's off," Ethan muttered, more to himself than the others. He reached for his toolbox, pulling out a socket wrench. "And there's a bearing that's shot, but I think—" He trailed off, focusing on the task. 20 minutes later, the conveyor belt whirred to life. The gathered workers broke into applause, but Ethan just smiled and wiped his hands on a rag. From her spot by the door, Amelia felt her chest tighten with emotion. The scene reminded her so much of her father, how he used to fix things at the school where he worked, never asking for recognition. Mike clapped Ethan's shoulder. "Corporate's gonna want to give you a bonus for this. You just saved us thousands." "No need," Ethan said quietly. "Just doing what's right." Besides, he gestured to the workers waiting with their packages. "These folks need to get their work done." Amelia watched him return to his station, that familiar ache in her chest growing stronger. She'd built her company on efficiency and profits, but somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten about the simple dignity of honest work, the kind her father had taught her about. Across town, in a dimly lit bar, Carl Benson nursed his 3rd drink of the morning, his bloodshot eyes fixed on his phone screen, where he'd pulled up Harper and Sloan's employee directory. The sight of Ethan Cole's name listed under warehouse operations made his hands shake with anger. "Shoulda known," he muttered. The bartender gave him a wary look, but Carl ignored it. He scrolled through his contacts until he found what he wanted. Danny Morris, local news reporter. They'd gone to high school together, shared a few drinks over the years. Danny was always hunting for his big break. Carl's fingers hovered over the call button. The memory of Ethan's quiet dignity the night he was fired only fueled Carl's resentment. "Think you're so perfect, don't you, Cole?" he whispered to himself. Back at the warehouse, Ethan helped load the last truck of the morning shift. Amelia had moved closer, pretending to check inventory sheets while actually watching him work. She saw how he showed a younger worker the proper lifting technique, how he double-checked the securing straps without being asked. "You've got a gift for this," she said when he passed near her. Ethan paused, wiping his hands again. "My dad always said any job worth doing is worth doing right." "Wise man," Amelia replied softly, thinking of her own father's similar words. "He was." Ethan's eyes grew distant for a moment. "Taught me everything I know about machines. And people too, I guess." Said treating both with respect makes the whole world run smoother. In the bar, Carl finally pressed the call button. Danny answered on the 3rd ring. "Morris," came the clipped response. "Danny, it's Carl Benson. Remember that favor you owe me?" Carl's voice was thick with bitterness. "Got something you might want to hear about Harper and Sloan, about their CEO playing favorites, breaking company policy." He paused for effect. "Could be the kind of story that makes careers." "I'm listening," Danny said. "Not over the phone," Carl replied. "Meet me tonight. I'll tell you about a janitor who got fired for theft, then magically got rehired at a better position. About security cameras being used for personal entertainment. About corporate cover-ups." The morning shift ended with Ethan gathering his things, unaware of the forces moving against him. Amelia watched him leave, her disguise as Amy feeling heavier than ever. She'd tried to help him, to make things right, but now something felt different. It wasn't just about fixing her mistake anymore. Carl hung up his phone, a bitter smile twisting his features. He ordered another drink, imagining the chaos his revelation would cause. "Let's see how your perfect little world holds up under the spotlight, Cole," he muttered. The warehouse grew quiet as the morning shift workers filed out. Ethan's repaired conveyor belt hummed steadily, a testament to skill and integrity that would soon be overshadowed by the gathering storm of controversy. But for now, in this moment, there was just honest work, well done, and the quiet pride that came with it. Amelia Harper's phone buzzed incessantly beside her bed, pulling her from her restless sleep. The dim light of dawn barely filtered through her penthouse windows as she reached for the device. Her eyes widened at the flood of notifications. Missed calls, texts, emails, and news alerts. Dozens of them. The first headline made her stomach drop. "Single dad fired for kindness now. The CEO who watched it all is silent." She sat up straight, her silk pajamas suddenly feeling too tight. With trembling fingers, she opened the article. There it was. The security footage she'd watched so many times, now playing on every major news network. Ethan giving his jacket to the homeless veteran. Ethan singing softly to Lily while cleaning. The confrontation with Carl. All of it. The article painted a devastating picture. A widowed father, working nights to support his daughter, fired for accepting an anonymous gift card. And the twist that had social media ablaze. The CEO had watched it all happen through security cameras. Amelia's phone rang. Her head of PR, David Matthews. "Have you seen it?" he asked without preamble. "I'm looking at it now." Her voice sounded hollow, even to her own ears. "How did this get out?" "Someone leaked the footage to Channel 7 News. It's everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. People are calling him the kind janitor." The homeless veteran came forward to verify the story. Even celebrities are sharing it. Amelia switched to speaker mode and opened Twitter. The #TheKindJanitor was trending nationwide. Video clips showed Ethan's quiet acts of service, fixing broken office chairs after hours, leaving encouraging notes for depressed employees he'd never met, praying over his mop handle for the people whose offices he cleaned. "The board is meeting in an hour," David continued. "They're concerned about the optics. Why didn't we stop the firing? Why were we watching him? The shareholders are already asking questions about leadership judgment." Amelia closed her eyes, remembering her father's words. Character is what you do when no one's watching. Except someone had been watching. She had been watching. "What's the public saying?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "It's mixed. People love Ethan. He's trending in 15 countries. But they're asking why a CEO would silently observe an employee's wrongful termination. The words voyeuristic and elitist keep coming up. Her other line beeped. The board chairman. "I have to go, David. Get me a full report in 30 minutes. Across town, Ethan Cole's morning started differently. He'd worked an early shift at the warehouse, grateful for the routine. As he pulled into his apartment complex's parking lot, he noticed unfamiliar vans with satellite dishes. People with cameras milled around near his building's entrance. "What's going on, Daddy?" Lily asked from the back seat, clutching her backpack. "I'm not sure, sweetheart." Ethan's protective instincts kicked in. "Bud, keep your head down, okay?" The moment he stepped out of the car, camera flashes erupted. Reporters surged forward, microphones extended. "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to be America's kind janitor? Did you know you were being filmed? What would you say to CEO Amelia Harper?" Ethan's mind reeled. He quickly opened Lily's door, shielding her with his body as they hurried toward their apartment. Questions continued to fly. "Why did you help the homeless man? How do you feel about being fired? Is it true you're a widower?" Inside their apartment, Ethan locked the door and drew the blinds. Lily's lower lip trembled. "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby." He hugged her close. Sometimes people just get excited about things they don't understand. His phone had dozens of missed calls, mostly unknown numbers. A text from his warehouse supervisor read, "Take the day off. Paid leave until this settles down." With shaking hands, Ethan opened his laptop. The video started playing automatically on his social media feed. There he was, in grainy black and white, giving his jacket to the veteran. The footage switched angles, showing him reading to Lily during his break. Then the confrontation with Carl, seen from above. His former supervisor's rage contrasting sharply with Ethan's quiet dignity. "Someone was watching us?" he whispered, understanding dawning slowly. The camera angles changed again. Someone had compiled weeks of footage. Ethan fixing things after hours, helping lost. Custodians find their way, sharing his lunch with a security guard who forgot his. Small moments he thought no one had seen. Comments scrolled past. "This is what real leadership looks like. Why didn't the CEO help him?" God bless this man and his daughter. Lily peered at the screen. That's you, Daddy. You're famous. But Ethan barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on the timestamp in the corner of each clip. Every moment had been recorded, cataloged, watched. The realization settled heavily in his chest. During all those lonely nights when he'd thought no one saw his struggles or his small acts of kindness, someone had been watching. Outside, cameras continued to flash through the blinds. His phone buzzed with another unknown number. The laptop screen showed his story spreading across the globe. His private moments of compassion, now public property. Ethan closed the computer gently and turned to Lily. How about some breakfast, sweetheart? I think we'll stay home today. She nodded, still confused but trusting. As Ethan moved to the kitchen, his mind spun with questions. Who had been watching? Why? And what would happen now that the whole world was watching too? Through their thin walls, he could hear reporters in the hallway, waiting for America's kind janitor to emerge and tell his story. But Ethan Cole just held his daughter close and tried to remember what it felt like when kindness was still a private thing, shared between strangers in the quiet of night. Ethan sat at his small kitchen table, staring at the business card the reporter had left. Lily was in her room, drawing pictures and mercifully distracted from the chaos outside. Through the window, he could see camera crews still lingering near their apartment building's entrance, their equipment glinting in the afternoon sun. His phone rang again, the 5th news station today. With a deep sigh, he picked up, remembering his mother's words about facing problems head-on. Mr. Cole, the reporter's voice was gentle, different from the others. I'm Sarah Chen from Channel 7 News. We just want to give you a chance to tell your side. Ethan glanced at Lily's closed door. Look, I appreciate the interest, but there's not much to tell. Just one statement? People want to know who you really are. He rubbed his tired eyes. The footage had shown everything. Him helping the homeless veteran, getting fired, all of it. What else was there to say? But maybe one comment would make them leave. All right, he said quietly. One statement. 20 minutes later, Ethan stood in front of a single camera in the building's courtyard. The reporter kept her promise. Just one question. What made you help that man that night, Mr. Cole? Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his work boots scuffing the concrete. I just did what I thought was right, he said simply. That's all anyone needs to know. The clip aired that evening, and something about his quiet dignity struck a chord. Social media exploded with support. The kind janitor started trending nationwide. Across town, in the gleaming Harper and Sloan building, Amelia paced her office. Her assistant had just delivered the latest news. The board wanted an emergency meeting. Now, she straightened her blazer, checking her reflection in the window. The woman staring back looked composed, but her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her files. The boardroom was thick with tension when she entered. 12 faces turned to her, some concerned, others coldly calculating. Thomas Reed, the senior board member, spoke first. Care to explain this PR nightmare, Amelia? She took her seat at the head of the table, setting down her papers with deliberate calm. Yes, I do. But first, I want to make something clear. I take full responsibility for everything that's happened. Murmurs rippled through the room. She continued, her voice steady. I sent that grocery card to Ethan Cole, anonymously, yes, but it was me. I watched. It's him through our security cameras and saw something we've lost sight of here. Genuine kindness, without expectation of reward. You spied on an employee? Patricia Morton, another board member, looked appalled. I observed someone doing extraordinary things when he thought no one was watching. Amelia corrected. And yes, I tried to help him secretly. That was my mistake, not the helping, but the secrecy. The room divided quickly. Some board members nodded in understanding, while others shook their heads in disapproval. This could cost us millions in reputation damage, warned James Wheeler, leaning forward aggressively. Or it could remind people what this company was built on, countered Sarah Chen, the youngest board member. Integrity, hard work, the values in our mission statement that we frame but rarely practice. The debate raged for hours. Amelia sat through it all, answering questions directly, refusing to hide behind corporate speak. As the sun set outside the wall of windows, she made her final statement. I'm prepared to step down if that's what the board decides. But first, I need to make one phone call. Back in his apartment, Ethan had just finished tucking Lily into bed when his phone rang. The number was blocked. Hello? Mr. Cole? The voice was familiar, but he couldn't place it. This is Amelia Harper. His breath caught. The CEO of Harper and Sloan, the woman whose building he'd cleaned, whose company he now worked for. I owe you an explanation, she continued. The woman you've been talking to at the warehouse, Amy, that was me. Ethan sank into his kitchen chair, processing this revelation. The friendly woman in casual clothes who'd asked about the machines, who'd smiled at Lily's drawings, she'd been the CEO all along? Why? He managed to ask. There was a long pause. When Amelia spoke again, her voice was softer, more real than the polished tones he'd heard in company videos. Because you were never invisible to me, she said. The silence that filled the line was heavy with unspoken words and shared understanding. Through his window, Ethan could see the city lights blinking in the distance, countless stories hiding behind each gleaming window, and for the first time, he truly felt seen. The morning sun streamed through the towering glass windows of Harper and Sloan's headquarters, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair outside Amelia Harper's office, his work clothes feeling out of place among the suits and designer outfits that rushed past. Sarah, Amelia's assistant, offered him a gentle smile. Mrs. Harper will see you now, Mr. Cole. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stood and walked through the heavy wooden doors. The office was spacious but surprisingly modest, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Amelia Harper stood by her desk, her professional demeanor softened by an uncertain smile. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Cole," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit." Ethan lowered himself into the chair, noting how different she looked from Amy at the warehouse. Gone were the casual clothes and easy manner, replaced by a tailored suit and carefully styled hair. Yet something in her eyes remained the same, that hint of kindness he'd glimpsed before. "I owe you an explanation," Amelia began, sitting down across from him, "and an apology. What happened with the gift card? I never meant for it to cause such trouble." "Why did you watch us?" Ethan asked quietly. "All those nights?" Amelia's fingers traced the edge of her desk. "The night you helped that homeless man. It reminded me of my father. He was a janitor too, you know, the kindest man I've ever known." She paused, emotion flickering across her face. "He passed away before he could see what I became. Sometimes I wonder if he'd be proud or disappointed." The honesty in her voice surprised Ethan. He remembered how she'd listened to his stories at the warehouse, never letting on who she really was. "You could have told me who you were. I wanted to. But then I saw how genuine you were, how you treated everyone the same regardless of their position. It was refreshing." She straightened in her chair. "That's actually why I asked you here today. I want to offer you a position as our facilities manager." Ethan blinked. "Facilities manager? You have the experience, the leadership skills, and most importantly, the integrity we need. And..." She smiled slightly. "You're already famous for fixing things nobody else can." "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for charity," Ethan said carefully. "This isn't charity, Mr. Cole. It's recognition of your abilities. And there's more." Amelia stood and walked to the window. "I want to start a company initiative to support low-income employees. Better healthcare coverage, educational assistance, emergency funds. The kind of help that could have prevented what happened to you in the first place." Ethan thought of Lily, of her growing pile of medical bills. Why now? Amelia turned back to face him, because sometimes it takes seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes to remember who we're supposed to be. My father used to say that true success isn't measured by what you gain, but by what you give back. A moment of understanding passed between them. Ethan saw not the powerful CEO, but a woman trying to honor her father's memory, just as he strived to be the kind of father his daughter could be proud of. "I'll accept," he said finally. "For Lily, and for the others who might need help." Amelia's smile was genuine this time. "Thank you." Over the next few weeks, they worked closely together, developing the initiative. Ethan brought practical insight from his years of factory work, while Amelia navigated corporate politics. During late-night planning sessions, they shared stories. Amelia about growing up poor, watching her. Father worked 2 jobs to put her through college. And Ethan about his late wife and the joy of raising Lily. One evening, as they reviewed proposals, Amelia confessed, "I stopped going to church after Dad died. Felt like God had abandoned us. But watching you pray with Lily that night in the break room, it reminded me of something I'd lost." Ethan nodded, understanding. Faith isn't about having all the answers. Sometimes it's just about knowing you're not alone. Their friendship grew naturally, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Amelia found herself looking forward to their meetings, where pretense fell away and real conversation flowed. Ethan discovered that beneath her corporate exterior was someone who truly wanted to make a difference. On a bright Tuesday morning, Ethan brought Lily to the office. She wore her best dress, her small hand clutching a piece of paper as they rode the elevator to the top floor. "Mrs. Harper?" Lily said shyly, approaching Amelia's desk. "I made this for you." Amelia knelt down to Lily's level, accepting the drawing with careful hands. It showed a simple but touching scene. Stick figures of Ethan helping others, with hearts floating above. "It's Daddy helping people," Lily explained proudly. "Like you help people too." Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes as she studied the crayon artwork. "This is beautiful, Lily. Thank you." She stood and immediately cleared a space on her desk, propping the drawing against her computer monitor where she could see it clearly. Ethan watched the interaction, seeing the warmth in Amelia's eyes as she asked Lily about her favorite colors and books. In that moment, they weren't CEO and employee, just people sharing a simple moment of connection. The autumn days had grown shorter, but inside Harper and Sloan's maintenance department, warmth and purpose filled the air. Ethan had settled into his role as facilities manager, earning respect from his team through quiet leadership and hands-on problem-solving. His office, though small, displayed Lily's artwork alongside maintenance schedules and repair logs. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Ethan checked the building systems on his computer while sipping coffee from his chipped mug. A photo of Lily sat beside his keyboard, her gap-toothed smile brightening even the most hectic days. The phone rang at 2:17 p.m. "Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice trembled slightly. "This is Mrs. Peterson from Riverside Elementary. There's been an incident with Lily?" Ethan's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. "What happened?" "She collapsed during recess. The ambulance is here now. They're taking her to Memorial Hospital." The world tilted sideways. Ethan grabbed his keys with shaking hands, barely remembering to tell his assistant he had a family emergency. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of red lights and prayer. In the emergency room, doctors spoke in hushed tones about murmurs and irregular rhythms. They ordered tests, drew blood, and attached monitors to Lily's tiny frame. She looked so small in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white sheets. "Daddy?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm scared." "I'm right here, sweetheart." Ethan held her hand, forcing his voice to stay steady. "The doctors are going to make you all better." Dr. Richardson, a cardiac specialist, arrived late that evening with test results. Her expression was grave as she explained about Lily's congenital heart defect, a condition that had gone undetected but was now critical. "She needs surgery," the doctor said, sliding over a document filled with medical terms and numbers. "Soon." Ethan's eyes fixed on the bottom line. $175,000. The room seemed to spin. Even with his new position and insurance, the cost was astronomical. "How soon?" he managed to ask. "Within the month? Any longer would be risky." Across town, Amelia sat in her office, staring at the email from the board of directors. Words like compromised judgment and emotional decision-making jumped from the screen. The viral video incident had sparked a chain reaction, leading to questions about every choice she'd made. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah about Lily's hospitalization. Amelia's heart clenched. She'd grown fond of the little girl who brought drawings to her office and asked innocent questions about the big windows. The board meeting that afternoon was brutal. Charts showed declining investor confidence. Several members questioned her ability to separate personal feelings from business decisions. The Cole situation demonstrated a concerning pattern, Director Matthews declared. This company needs steady leadership, not emotional impulses. Amelia thought of her father, who taught her that true leadership meant standing by your principles. But now, watching her life's work crumble, doubt crept in. Back at the hospital, Ethan filled out endless forms. Each one asked about payment methods, insurance limits, payment plans. The numbers blurred together, impossibly large. He'd already sold his car and was looking into second mortgages, but it wouldn't be enough. Lily slept fitfully, monitors beeping in the background. Ethan held her small hand, remembering another hospital room 2 years ago when he'd lost Sarah. The same helplessness washed over him. "Please, God," he whispered, "not her too." A soft knock interrupted his prayers. A nurse brought in more medications, checking Lily's vitals with practiced efficiency. "Your daughter's quite the artist," she said kindly, noticing the drawings scattered across the bedside table. "She made these while waiting for tests." Ethan picked up one of the pictures, a crayon drawing of people holding hands under a bright sun. In Lily's wobbly handwriting, it read, My family. She'd drawn herself, Ethan, and to his surprise, Amelia. Meanwhile, Amelia stood in her office, methodically packing her personal items into boxes. Family, photos, awards, the drawing Lily had given her. Each item represented years of dedication and sacrifice. The board had made their position clear: resign gracefully or face a vote of no confidence. She picked up her father's old pocket watch, remembering his words, "Success means nothing if you lose your soul getting there." She'd built this company from nothing, but somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten his simple wisdom, until Ethan reminded her. The security footage still played occasionally in her mind. A man giving his coat to a stranger, fixing broken things without being asked, praying in empty hallways. Now his daughter lay in a hospital bed, and all her power and wealth couldn't erase the board's decision. Ethan dozed in the uncomfortable hospital chair, still holding Lily's hand. The monitor's steady beeping had become a haunting lullaby. Doctors and nurses moved quietly around them, adjusting medications and checking readings. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small but clear. "I'm here, baby." He leaned forward, brushing hair from her forehead. "Will I get better like Mommy did?" The question hit him like a physical blow. How could he explain that Mommy hadn't gotten better? That sometimes prayers went unanswered? "We're going to do everything we can," he said instead, voice thick with unshed tears. "I promise." Across town, Amelia placed the last of her belongings in a box. 20 years of work, reduced to a few cardboard containers. Her resignation letter sat unsigned on the desk. Formal, professional, empty of the emotion churning inside her. She looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere out there, a father sat beside his daughter's hospital bed, probably praying. She thought of her own father's last days, how helpless she'd felt despite all her education and ambition. The cleaning crew arrived, starting their nightly routine, just like Ethan used to do, making things right in the quiet hours. The parallel wasn't lost on her as she signed her name to the resignation letter, ending one chapter to perhaps begin another. In the hospital room, Ethan watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily had finally fallen into a peaceful sleep, her face relaxed for the first time in days. The monitors beeped steadily, marking time in electronic pulses. He pulled out his wallet, counting the meager savings once again. The numbers hadn't changed, but he kept checking, as if money might magically appear. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than any machinery he'd ever lifted. A nurse brought him a cup of coffee and a sympathetic smile. "Try to rest, Mr. Cole. Tomorrow's another day." But tomorrow looked just as impossible as today. He bowed his head, words failing as he tried to pray. In the silence, monitors beeped, marking each precious heartbeat of his daughter's fragile life. 2 days after Lily's diagnosis, Ethan stood in front of Harper and Sloan's gleaming headquarters. The familiar building felt different now, less imposing, more like a place where real people fought real battles. His work boots squeaked against the polished marble floor as he made his way to the executive floor. The usual buzz of corporate activity had dimmed to a whisper. Empty boxes lined the hallway outside Amelia's office, each labeled in her neat handwriting. Through the glass doors, he saw her organizing files, her normally perfect posture slightly stooped with fatigue. She looked up when he knocked, managing a wan smile. "Mr. Cole, please, come in." "I heard the news," Ethan said softly, taking in the half-packed office. Family photos and awards were already wrapped in tissue paper. "You didn't have to step down." Amelia shook her head, setting down a stack of papers. "The board didn't force me out, Ethan. I chose to leave." She gestured to a chair. "How's Lily?" "Stable." His voice cracked slightly. "The doctors want to do the surgery soon." "But—" He trailed off, unable to voice the crushing weight of the medical bills. "I know." Amelia's eyes softened with understanding. "That's actually why I wanted to see you. I've been working on something." "Miss Harper," Ethan interrupted gently, "I came to thank you for everything you've done already, but I can't accept any more help." "This isn't charity," she insisted, pulling out a folder. "It's a company-wide medical emergency fund for all employees' families." She spread the documents across her desk. "The board approved it this morning. My final act as CEO." Ethan stared at the papers, his throat tight. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but your pride won't let you accept help?" Amelia's voice held no judgment, only recognition. "I used to be the same way. My father worked 3 jobs to put me through college. He wouldn't take a dime from anyone." "How did you learn to accept help?" Ethan asked quietly. Amelia's fingers traced the edge of her desk. I watched him work himself to death, refusing assistance until it was too late. She met Ethan's gaze directly. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we can't do it alone. Tears pricked at Ethan's eyes. I've been praying, he admitted, asking God why this is happening to Lily. She's just a little girl. Faith isn't about understanding why, Amelia said softly. Sometimes it's just about trusting there's a purpose we can't see yet. She pulled out a tissue box, offering it to him. Your daughter taught me that, actually. What do you mean? Remember that drawing she gave me? The one of you helping people? Amelia retrieved it from her desk drawer. She wrote something on the back I never showed you. Ethan took the crayon drawing, turning it over. In Lily's wobbly handwriting were the words, "Angels help people who help people." Out of the mouths of babes, Amelia smiled gently. Maybe it's time to let the angels work, Ethan. He sat there for a long moment, the drawing trembling in his hands. Finally, he nodded, unable to speak. I've already set up the trust, Amelia said quietly. It's called the Lily Cole Children's Medical Fund. The paperwork will go through normal channels, completely anonymous to protect your privacy. Why are you doing all this? Ethan asked, his voice rough with emotion. Because someone once showed kindness to a stranger in a stairwell, she answered simply, and reminded me what really matters. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the city in soft orange light. Finally, Ethan stood to leave. Thank you, he said quietly. Not just for this, but for seeing me, really seeing me when I thought I was invisible. Go home to your daughter, Amelia smiled. And Ethan, keep the faith. That evening, as Ethan sat beside Lily's hospital bed, reading her favorite story, his phone rang. The hospital's financial office was calling with unexpected news. Mr. Cole, a foundation is offered to sponsor Lily's surgery completely. Ethan's eyes filled with tears as he looked up at the hospital ceiling, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Thank you, he whispered, knowing his words reached far beyond the sterile hospital walls. The morning arrived cold and clear, painting the hospital windows with intricate frost patterns that reminded Ethan of Lily's drawings, the ones she made with her breath on their apartment windows during winter mornings. His daughter lay in the pre-op bed, her small frame nearly lost among the crisp white sheets and forest of beeping machines that surrounded her like electronic sentinels. The monitors cast an eerie blue glow across her pale face as she clutched Mr. Whiskers, her threadbare stuffed cat whose orange fur had been loved nearly bald over the years. Nurses bustled around with quiet efficiency, checking monitors and adjusting IVs with practiced movements. Their soft-soled shoes squeaked against the polished floor as they moved from task to task, speaking in hushed tones that somehow made the gravity of the situation feel even heavier. Daddy? Lily's voice trembled like autumn leaves in the wind. Her eyes, so much like Sarah's, searched his face with a mixture of fear and trust that made his chest ache. Will you sing our song? Ethan's throat tightened as if someone had wrapped their hands around it. He perched carefully on the edge of her narrow hospital bed, the same type of bed where Sarah, his beloved wife, had spent her final days 3 years ago. The familiar weight of that memory pressed against his shoulders, but he pushed it aside with the determination of a man who had learned to compartmentalize grief in order to survive. He began humming softly, his voice rough with emotion, as the gentle melody of "You Are My Sunshine" filled the sterile room. The tune seemed to chase away some of the clinical coldness, replacing it with warmth and love that wrapped around them both like an invisible embrace. I love you, sweetheart, he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. Her skin felt warm and soft, so precious and fragile that he was afraid to breathe too hard. The angels will watch over you today, just like they always do. Just like Mommy does? Lily's eyes were bright with the kind of innocent trust that only children possess, faith so pure it could move mountains or break hearts with equal ease. Just like Mommy does, Princess. She's going to be right there with you, holding your hand the whole time. The surgical team arrived like a carefully choreographed dance, their scrubs a sea of pale blue that seemed to flow through the doorway. Dr. Matthews, the lead surgeon whose gentle manner had instantly won Ethan's trust during their consultations, placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. His touch was firm and confident, the hand of a man who had performed this delicate procedure countless times before. It's time, Mr. Cole, he said quietly, his voice carrying both professionalism and genuine compassion. We're going to take excellent care of your little girl. Ethan's legs felt like they were made of lead as he walked alongside the gurney through the maze of hospital corridors. The wheels squeaked rhythmically against the polished linoleum floor, each turn bringing them closer to the operating room doors that loomed ahead like a gateway to uncertainty. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. Lily's small hand remained wrapped around his finger with surprising strength, as if she were trying to anchor herself to him before the storm. Her grip was warm and determined, and he memorized the feeling, knowing he would need to hold on to this moment during the long hours ahead. "See you soon, Daddy," she said with the kind of bravery that made his heart swell with pride, though her chin quivered slightly, betraying the fear she was trying so hard to hide. "I'll be right here waiting, Princess. I'm not going anywhere. When you wake up, I'll be the first face you see." He managed a smile that felt like it might crack his face, even as his heart thundered against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The double door swung shut with a soft whoosh that seemed to echo through his soul, the sound final and definitive. Suddenly, he was alone in the corridor, surrounded by the antiseptic smell of disinfectant and the distant murmur of hospital life continuing around him. For several long minutes, Ethan stood frozen in place, staring at those impenetrable doors as if his gaze alone could somehow protect his daughter on the other side. His hands hung uselessly at his sides, and he felt more helpless than he had since the night Sarah died. Eventually, his feet carried him through the winding hallways to the hospital chapel, a small sanctuary tucked away on the third floor. It was a quiet room with modest stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns across worn wooden pews, their surfaces polished smooth by countless hands seeking comfort in times of crisis. The air smelled faintly of old wood and candle wax, creating an atmosphere of peace that stood in stark contrast to the clinical efficiency of the rest of the hospital. He sank into the front row pew, his body feeling suddenly heavy with exhaustion and worry. His hands clasped together so tightly that his knuckles turned white, and he could feel his wedding ring, the one he still wore after all these years, pressing into his palm. "Please?" he whispered to the empty chapel, his voice barely audible in the sacred silence. "Please don't take her too. I can't do this without her. She's everything good that's left of Sarah. Please, God, not her too." The hours that followed crawled by with agonizing slowness, each minute feeling like an eternity. Outside the chapel windows, Ethan watched afternoon light gradually fade to evening, then deepen into the purple shadows of dusk. He alternated between pacing the small space and dropping to his knees in prayer, his thoughts constantly drifting to Sarah and the promises he had made to her in this very same hospital. He remembered her courage through her own illness, how she had faced each day with grace and determination, even as her body betrayed her. Most of all, he remembered how she had made him promise to keep singing to Lily, to keep faith alive in their daughter's heart, even when his own faith felt as fragile as spun glass. Around midnight, when the hospital had settled into its quieter rhythm, soft footsteps echoed in the chapel doorway. Ethan didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The careful, measured pace was unmistakably familiar. Amelia Harper's presence had become a constant in their lives over these past months, like a guardian angel operating in the shadows, always there when they needed her most, but never asking for recognition or thanks. She didn't speak, didn't try to offer the kind of empty comfort that well-meaning people often provided in moments like these. Instead, she slipped quietly into a pew several rows back, her expensive shoes making barely a whisper against the stone floor. When Ethan finally gathered the courage to glance back, she was gone, as if she had been nothing more than a figment of his desperate imagination. But there on the bench, where she had sat, lay a small silver angel pin, its delicate wings catching the soft lamplight and throwing tiny rainbows across the wooden surface. The sight of it brought tears to his eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming knowledge that he and Lily were not alone in this fight. More hours passed in a blur of coffee that grew cold in paper cups and updates from night shift nurses who stopped by periodically with carefully measured words. "She's stable, Mr. Cole. The doctors are working. Everything's proceeding as planned." Each message brought both relief and terror in equal measure, hope and fear dancing together in his chest like old partners who knew each other's steps by heart. In the deepest part of night, when the world outside had grown completely still, memories flooded back with crushing force. Sarah's last night, when the monitors had flatlined and the sudden silence had been more deafening than any alarm. The way Lily had crawled into his lap at the funeral, her small body shaking with sobs as she asked when Mommy would wake up. The countless evenings since, when he had stood outside his daughter's bedroom door, listening to her whispered prayers for her mother through the thin walls. "I can't lose her." Ethan breathed into the darkness, pressing his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. God, please. She's all I have left of the woman I loved. She's my whole world, my reason for getting up every morning. Please don't take her from me too. The chapel's silence wrapped around him like a familiar blanket, offering comfort without judgment. Through the stained glass windows, he watched the sky gradually transform from deep black to navy blue to the pale gray that promised dawn. The city was waking up beyond these walls, but inside this sacred space, time seemed suspended, holding him in a bubble of prayer and hope. When footsteps finally echoed in the hallway outside, Ethan's heart leaped into his throat. Doctor. Matthews appeared in the doorway, still wearing his surgical scrubs, his hair slightly mussed from long hours under the operating room lights. Ethan's entire world narrowed to the doctor's face as he searched desperately for any sign of good news, any hint that his prayers had been answered. She made it, Mr. Cole. Doctor, Matthews said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet triumph that only came after successfully navigating the delicate landscape of a child's heart. The surgery went perfectly. She's going to be just fine. The words hit Ethan like a physical force, knocking the breath from his lungs and sending shockwaves of relief through every cell in his body. His legs gave out completely, and he collapsed back onto the hard wooden pew as tears streamed freely down his face. Relief crashed through him in powerful waves, leaving him breathless and trembling like a man who had just been pulled back from the edge of a cliff. Thank you, he whispered over and over, the words spilling from his lips like a prayer, like a song, like the most important words he had ever spoken. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The recovery room hummed with the gentle beeping of monitors as sunlight filtered through thin curtains. Lily's eyelids fluttered open, revealing her bright blue eyes, tired but alive with that familiar spark. Ethan, who hadn't left her side for 36 hours, leaned forward in his chair, his work-worn hands gentle as they smoothed her hair. Hey, sweetheart, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Welcome back. Lily's smile, though weak, lit up her pale face. Daddy? She managed. Her voice barely whisper. Did the angels help the doctors fix my heart? Ethan swallowed hard, nodding. They sure did, princess. And you were so brave. A nurse named Sarah checked Lily's vitals, her experienced hands quick and gentle. She's doing wonderfully, she said, adjusting the IV line. Someone up there must really love this little girl. Not many families get blessed with such generous anonymous donors. Ethan's throat tightened. He knew who that donor was, even if he couldn't say it aloud. We've been blessed, he agreed softly. Over the next few days, as Lily grew stronger, Ethan noticed other parents in the cardiac ward, some pacing anxiously, others slumped in waiting room chairs with worry etched on their faces. He recognized that look of desperate hope. During Lily's naps, he started bringing them coffee, sharing quiet words of encouragement. My daughter just had the same surgery, he'd say, offering a styrofoam cup and a gentle smile. I know it's scary, but you're not alone. One evening, while Lily colored in her hospital bed, a young mother broke down in the hallway. Her son needed a similar operation, but insurance wouldn't cover it. Ethan sat with her, listening to her story. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places, he told her, thinking of Amelia. Don't give up hope. The next day, he asked the hospital's volunteer coordinator about formal ways to help. Before he knew it, he was spending his free hours organizing support groups for parents of cardiac patients, coordinating meal deliveries, and simply being there to listen. Lily watched him proudly from her bed as she recovered. Daddy, she said one afternoon, you're making everybody smile, just like Mommy used to. The nurses began calling him the Heart Dad, and his presence became a source of comfort in the ward. He knew exactly what to say to scared parents, how to explain complex medical terms in simple ways, and when to just sit quietly and hold someone's hand. 2 weeks after Lily's surgery, as she grew stronger each day, the head nurse pulled Ethan aside. We've never seen anything like this, she said, gesturing to the waiting room where 3 families sat together, sharing coffee and hope. You've created a real community here. Word spread through the hospital about the former janitor who'd become an unofficial ambassador of hope. Local news stations picked up the story, focusing on how one family's journey had sparked a movement of kindness. Across town, in her modest new apartment, Amelia Harper sat on her couch watching the evening news. The reporter stood outside the hospital, speaking about Lily's Foundation for Kind Hearts, a new initiative funded by anonymous donations from Harper and Sloan employees. The camera panned to show children playing in a newly renovated waiting room, their parents gathered in conversation nearby. Ethan's voice came through as he spoke about the importance of community support during medical crises. "Sometimes the darkest moments bring out the brightest lights in people," he said on screen, as Lily sat beside him, her color restored and her smile bright. Amelia's eyes welled with tears as she watched. Her resignation had cost her the CEO position, but seeing how goodness could multiply when given the chance, filled her with a peace she hadn't known in years. She smiled quietly, knowing that sometimes the best view isn't from the top of a skyscraper, but from the ground where real lives intersect. The news segment showed warehouse workers and office staff from Harper & Sloan making donations to the foundation, many mentioning how inspired they were by the kind janitor's story. The reporter explained how the foundation had already helped 3 families afford critical surgeries. Lily appeared on screen again, holding up one of her drawings. It showed stick figures holding hands in a circle around a big red heart. "Daddy says when we help others, our own hearts get bigger too," she explained with childlike wisdom. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees outside Harper & Sloan's headquarters as Ethan Cole walked through the employee entrance. 6 months had passed since Lily's surgery, and the building felt different now. Warmer, more like home. "Morning, Mr. Cole," called Jerry from security, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Got those work orders for the 3rd floor ready?" Ethan patted his shoulder as he passed. "Thanks, Jerry. And please, it's still just Ethan." His new office, a modest space with windows overlooking the city, held a wall of thank you cards from families held by the Medical Trust Fund. Each morning, he'd touch them gently, remembering his own journey. Today, a fresh envelope waited on his desk, different from the usual mail. The cream-colored invitation bore elegant gold lettering. Harper & Sloan Foundation First Annual Charity Gala, celebrating compassion and leadership. His hands trembled slightly as he read further. Guest speaker, Amelia Harper. He hadn't seen her since she'd stepped down, though her influence remained everywhere, especially in the lives touched by Lily's foundation. "Dad!" Lily's voice rang through the hallway. She bounced in, her backpack swinging, followed by Miss Martinez, his assistant who watched her after school. "Look what I made in art class!" Ethan's heart swelled, as it did every time he saw her running, breathing easily, full of life. She held up a painted picture of their family, including a figure with dark hair wearing a business suit. "Is that Miss Harper?" he asked softly. Lily nodded. "She helped make me better. Can we send it to her?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed with a message from the board chairman. "Hope you're coming to the gala, Ethan. The maintenance department's turnaround under your leadership deserves recognition." He glanced at his reflection in the window. Same work boots, same calloused hands. The gala would be filled with executives in $1,000 suits. But something in him knew he needed to go, if only to say thank you properly. That afternoon, he visited Marcus, an older gentleman who worked in shipping. "Think I could borrow that suit you mentioned? Got invited to some fancy party." Marcus's eyes twinkled. "The charity gala? About time they recognized you, son." He wrote down his address. "Come by tonight. My son's old suit should fit you just fine." Later that evening, Ethan stood in Marcus's living room, adjusting an unfamiliar tie. The charcoal gray suit fit surprisingly well, though his shoulders felt stiff beneath the tailored fabric. "Now that's more like it," Marcus said, brushing lint from the shoulders. "You clean up good, kid." Ethan smiled uncertainly at his reflection. "Feel like I'm playing dress-up." "Nah." Marcus turned him toward the mirror. "You earned your place at that table. Remember that." The night of the gala arrived cool and clear. Lily stayed with her aunt, insisting on helping him with his tie before he left. "You look handsome, Daddy," she said, hugging him tight. The hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and floating candles. Ethan handed his borrowed jacket to the coat check, fighting the urge to turn around. Servers circulated with champagne flutes and tiny appetizers he couldn't name. "Ethan," called Sarah from HR, waving him over to a table. "We saved you a seat." He relaxed slightly among familiar faces, other department heads who'd supported the foundation's work. They chatted about recent successes, 3 children's surgeries funded, 5 families kept from bankruptcy, a new mentorship program for single parents. The lights dimmed as the chairman approached the podium. "Tonight, we celebrate a transformation in corporate culture," he began. "A reminder that true leadership begins with compassion. Ethan's attention drifted to movement near the stage. And there she was, Amelia Harper, elegant in deep blue, looking somehow both exactly the same and completely different. Gone was the corporate armor she'd worn like a shield. Her smile seemed softer, more genuine. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a moment, he was back in that warehouse, chatting with Amy about broken machines and second chances. She smiled, warm and real, and something in his chest eased. Maybe they both belonged here after all, not because of titles or suits, but because sometimes grace came disguised as security cameras and grocery cards, as borrowed jackets and healing hearts. Sometimes it looked like two people from different worlds, learning to see through each other's eyes. The grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel sparkled with elegant chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the city lights. Ethan tugged at his borrowed suit collar, feeling out of place among the well-dressed crowd. His worn dress shoes, polished carefully that morning, clicked against the marble floor as he made his way to a corner table. The room buzzed with conversation and the soft clink of champagne glasses. Circular tables draped in cream-colored linens filled the space, each decorated with simple centerpieces of white roses. Near the stage, a banner read, "Lights On, the Ethan Cole Story, First Annual Charity Gala." Sarah Martinez, a warehouse worker whose son had received cancer treatment through the foundation, stepped up to the microphone. Her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke. "6 months ago, I thought I would lose my boy," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "But thanks to this foundation, Tommy is cancer-free and back in school. Mr. Cole visited us every week in the hospital, bringing Tommy his favorite comic books." Ethan lowered his head, remembering those visits. He'd started them shortly after Lily's recovery, understanding too well the loneliness of hospital corridors. More testimonies followed: a maintenance worker whose wife needed emergency surgery, a security guard whose daughter received life-saving medication. Each story touched on the same themes: dignity preserved, hope restored, kindness repaid. The lights dimmed slightly as Amelia Harper took the stage. She wore a simple black dress, her silver hair elegantly styled. Gone was the corporate armor she'd once worn like a shield. Instead, she carried herself with a gentler confidence. "Good evening," she began, her voice warm and clear. "Tonight isn't about corporate success or financial achievements. It's about something far more valuable, the currency of kindness." Ethan listened intently as she continued. "Sometimes the most profound changes start in the smallest moments. A jacket given to a stranger, a prayer whispered in an empty office. These acts may seem invisible, but they ripple outward in ways we can't imagine." Her words struck deep chords in Ethan's heart. He thought of that cold night in the stairwell, never knowing someone was watching, never imagining how that simple act would transform so many lives. "We live in a world that often measures worth by titles and bank accounts," Amelia continued. "But true value lies in the moments when we choose compassion over convenience, dignity over judgment, and grace over gain." She paused, her eyes scanning the room until they met Ethan's. "I learned this lesson from a night janitor who taught me that leadership isn't about watching from above, it's about serving from alongside." The audience applauded warmly as Amelia concluded her speech. People began mingling, sharing stories and tears of gratitude. Ethan stood quietly, watching the scene unfold, until he felt a presence beside him. "Hello, Ethan," Amelia said softly. He turned to face her, noting how different she seemed from the distant CEO who had once watched him through security cameras. "That was quite a speech," he said. They moved to a quiet corner near the windows. The city stretched out below them, a tapestry of lights and shadows. "I need to apologize properly," Amelia began. "That gift? Card, I never meant for it to cause such trouble." Ethan shook his head. "You were trying to help, and in the end, you did more than help. You changed lives, including my own," she admitted. "Watching you through those cameras, I saw something I'd lost. The simple truth my father tried to teach me about serving others. Your father was a janitor too, wasn't he?" "Yes." Amelia's voice softened with memory. "He cleaned office buildings for 30 years, never complained, always helped others. When I became successful, I thought I'd move beyond that life. But watching you, I realized I'd moved beyond something precious." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "You know," Ethan said finally, "when I first learned about the cameras, I felt exposed, almost betrayed. But now I understand. Sometimes God uses unexpected ways to show us we're not alone." Amelia nodded, her eyes glistening. How is Lily doing? Strong as ever, back to running circles around me in the park. His face lit up with fatherly pride. She asked about you the other day. Remembered the lady who kept her company in the warehouse. You've built something remarkable here. Amelia gestured to the room full of people whose lives had been touched by the foundation. All because you chose kindness when you thought no one was watching. Ethan straightened his borrowed jacket. We both did. You could have ignored what you saw on those cameras. Instead, you chose to act. They turned to face each other fully. Amelia extended her hand, and Ethan took it. Their handshake was firm, warm, a gesture of equals bound by shared understanding. Thank you, they said simultaneously, then laughed softly. Their eyes met with mutual respect and gratitude. Two people who had started as observer and observed, now standing together as partners in something larger than themselves. The night air held a familiar chill as Ethan's old sedan pulled into the parking lot of Harper & Sloan's main building. The towering structure looked different now, less imposing than it had those many months ago when he'd first started his night shift. The windows were dark, and the usual bustle of corporate life had settled into evening silence. He sat in his car for a moment, remembering those first nights with Lily curled up in the break room, her math homework spread across the table while he mopped floors and emptied trash bins. So much had changed since then. The security guard, recognizing him, waved him through with a friendly nod. The lobby's marble floors echoed his footsteps as he walked toward the elevator. Everything was exactly as he remembered it. The brass railings he used to polish, the reception desk where that motivational plaque had stood, the corner where he'd found the homeless veteran that cold night. The elevator dinged softly as it carried him up to the 14th floor, his old floor. The doors opened to darkness, but his hand found the light switch without thinking. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, illuminating the empty hallway where he'd spent so many quiet nights. Sure looks different empty, he muttered to himself, his voice carrying in the silence. He walked slowly, touching the walls occasionally, remembering. Here was where Lily would sit and read her stories. There was the supply closet where he'd stored his mop and bucket. The break room still had the same coffee maker, though it sat cold and unused now. His footsteps led him to the stairwell, the same one where he'd found that homeless man. The concrete steps were clean now, but he could still picture the veteran huddled there, seeking shelter from the cold. That simple act of kindness had set everything in motion, though he hadn't known it at the time. The security camera hung in its familiar spot, its red light dim. Ethan remembered how he used to barely notice it, just another fixture in his nightly routine. Now he knew that sometimes the most important moments happened when you thought no one was watching. Something caught his eye, a white envelope taped carefully beneath the camera. His name was written across it in elegant handwriting he recognized as Amelia's. With careful fingers, he peeled it free and opened it. Inside was a single note card. The message was simple, but made his throat tight with emotion. Sometimes God records the moments we think no one sees to remind us we're still worthy of light. He read it twice, then 3 times, letting the words sink in. They captured everything, his struggles, his faith, the unexpected way his life had changed. He thought about Lily, healthy and strong now, sleeping peacefully at home. He thought about all the families the foundation had helped, about the second chances that had grown from one small act of kindness. The empty hallway seemed to hold all his memories, the hard nights, the uncertainty, the moments of grace. Standing there, he could almost hear the echo of Lily's bedtime prayers, the squeak of his mop against the floor, the soft conversations he'd had with Amelia when she was just Amy from the warehouse. Carefully, reverently, he folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. His voice was barely a whisper in the quiet building. Thank you. Above him, the security camera's red light flickered once, as if in response, then faded to darkness. The autumn sun streamed through the freshly cleaned windows of the new Lily Foundation Community Center. What had once been an abandoned warehouse now gleamed with fresh paint and hope. Bright murals decorated the walls, depicting scenes of families, helping families, and hands reaching out to lift others up. Inside the main hall, folding chairs filled quickly with local residents, social workers, and curious onlookers. The space buzzed with excited conversation. Near the front, Lily Cole, now 8 and healthy, straightened a bouquet of yellow daisies on the podium. Her dark curls bounced as she moved, and her cheeks glowed with the same warmth that had touched so many hearts during her recovery. Is everything perfect, sweetheart? Ethan asked, adjusting his tie. He still wasn't used to wearing one, but today was special. Almost, Lily replied, reaching up to fix her father's crooked collar. Now it's perfect. At the back of the hall, Amelia Harper slipped in quietly, wearing simple clothes that helped her blend with the crowd. She chose a seat in the last row, her heart full as she watched families filter in. Many of them she recognized from the hospital program, parents who'd received help from the foundation, veterans who'd found purpose in volunteering, children who'd been given second chances. The community center represented everything they'd worked for over the past year. A place where dignity met compassion, where strength found support. The building housed job training facilities, childcare services, and even a small medical clinic. But more than that, it stood as a testament to how one small act of kindness could ripple outward, touching countless lives. As the clock struck 2, Ethan made his way to the podium. He looked different now, still humble, but carrying himself with quiet confidence. The struggles that had once weighed him down had transformed into wisdom that lifted others up. "Welcome," he began, his voice steady and warm. "A year ago, I stood in a different building, pushing a mop across floors that seemed endless. I had a daughter to feed, bills I couldn't pay, and what felt like impossible dreams." He paused, looking out at the faces before him. But what I didn't know then was that sometimes our darkest moments are just the beginning of our brightest chapters. In the back row, Amelia pulled a tissue from her purse, dabbing at her eyes as memories flooded back. The security camera footage, the grocery card that had caused so much trouble, the late nights watching a father's quiet dignity shine through every task he performed. "This center," Ethan continued, gesturing to the walls around them, "isn't just a building. It's a promise to everyone who's ever felt invisible, to every parent working 2 jobs to make ends meet, to every veteran searching for purpose, to every person who thinks their acts of kindness go unseen." Lily stood beside her father now, holding his hand. Her presence made the moment even more poignant. A living reminder of how hope could heal what seemed broken. "We dedicate this place to every janitor who's ever stayed late to fix a broken chair no one asked them to fix. To every father who skipped meals so their child could eat. To every soul who believed that kindness mattered, even when the world seemed too busy to notice." The room grew quiet, heavy with shared understanding. In the audience, a young single mother wiped tears while her toddler slept against her shoulder. An elderly veteran in a wheelchair nodded slowly, recognition in his eyes. But most importantly, Ethan's voice softened. "We dedicate this center to the truth that none of us walks alone. That sometimes angels wear business suits and sometimes salvation comes through security cameras." A gentle laugh rippled through the crowd. "That God sees every act of love, no matter how small, and uses it to build bridges between hearts that seemed worlds apart." Lily stepped forward then, her voice clear and strong. "And sometimes," she added, making the audience smile, "the biggest miracles start with a peanut butter sandwich and a prayer." Ethan laughed softly, squeezing his daughter's hand. The Lily Foundation Community Center isn't just about giving help, it's about giving dignity. It's about remembering that we're all connected, all worthy of second chances and grace. In the back row, Amelia's tears fell freely now. She thought of her own father, who had worked as a janitor his whole life, who had taught her that true worth wasn't measured in dollars but in deeds. She remembered his calloused hands, his quiet pride, his belief that every person deserved respect regardless of their position. So today, Ethan concluded, as we open these doors, we're not just launching a program or christening a building. We're declaring that in this place, every person matters. Every story has value. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous standing ovation. People embraced, strangers wiped each other's tears, and hope filled the room like sunlight. From her seat in the back, Amelia whispered words meant only for heaven to hear. Your father would be proud. She wasn't sure if she meant Ethan's father, her own, or perhaps both. All these men who had taught their children that true wealth lay in how you treated others. Lily spotted her then, and without hesitation, ran down the aisle to hug her. Amelia held the little girl close, remembering the first time she'd seen her on the security cameras, doing homework while her father cleaned floors. Now, here she stood, healthy and strong, a living testament to what could happen when people dared to care. The applause continued to fill the hall, a sound like thunder and hope combined, as hundreds of hearts beat together in celebration of second chances and unseen love made visible at last. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the community center cafe, casting warm golden patterns across the wooden tables. The aroma of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls filled the air as families gathered for their Sunday morning tradition. At a corner table, Ethan Cole sat with his daughter Lily and Amelia Harper, sharing a quiet breakfast while a camera crew set up their equipment nearby. "Can I have another blueberry muffin, Daddy?" Lily asked, her cheeks rosy with health. The scar from her heart surgery had faded to a thin silver line, barely visible beneath her yellow sundress. "Of course, sweetheart." Ethan reached for the basket, his weathered hands steady and sure. He'd traded his janitor's uniform for casual clothes these days, but his eyes still held that same gentle kindness that had caught Amelia's attention so long ago. The reporter, Sarah Chen, adjusted her microphone and smiled at them. "We're almost ready. Just act natural. Pretend we're not even here." Amelia stirred her coffee, looking more relaxed than she had in years. She'd abandoned her power suits for a simple blouse and slacks. Teaching leadership ethics at the community college suited her. She'd found her true calling, helping others find their way. "It's funny," Ethan said softly, watching a group of kids playing by the window. "A year ago, I was trying to hide from cameras. Now here we are, telling our story on purpose." "Because it's a story worth telling," Amelia replied. She reached over and straightened Lily's hair bow. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripples. The community center buzzed with life around them. Veterans gathered for their weekly support group in one room. Single parents attended job training workshops in another. The walls were decorated with children's artwork, bright splashes of hope and creativity. "Ready when you are," Sarah called, giving them a thumbs up. The camera's red light blinked on, and Sarah began. "So, Ethan, tell us how this all started." Ethan glanced at Lily, then at Amelia, before speaking. "I was just trying to get by, working nights as a janitor. One evening, I found someone who needed help more than I did. I didn't know anyone was watching." "But someone was?" Sarah prompted, looking at Amelia. "Yes." Amelia's voice grew soft with memory. "I saw kindness when I'd almost stopped believing in it. Sometimes we forget that real leadership isn't about power. It's about serving others." Lily swung her legs under the table, comfortable in front of the camera. "Daddy always says that. Helping people is like turning on lights in dark rooms." The crew chuckled warmly. Sarah leaned forward. "And now, a year later, the Lily Foundation has helped how many families?" "Over 200, Ethan answered, his voice thick with emotion. "We've provided emergency medical care, job training, housing assistance, but more importantly, we've built a community. Nobody faces their struggles alone anymore." Through the windows, they could see the garden where residents grew vegetables to share. Beyond that stood the playground where Lily had first collapsed, now transformed into a safe space where children played while their parents attended classes or support groups. "Miss Amelia teaches us about business," Lily announced proudly. "She says everyone deserves a chance to shine." Amelia smiled, her eyes misting slightly. "And you've taught us all about courage, little one." The camera panned across their faces, capturing the genuine warmth between them. This wasn't just a feel-good story for the evening news. It was real life, transformed by simple acts of compassion. "The Foundation's motto is light stays on," Sarah noted. "Can you explain what that means?" Ethan reached for Lily's hand. "It means hope doesn't have an off switch. Even in our darkest moments, someone's watching, someone cares. We just have to be brave enough to help each other." A shaft of sunlight caught the security camera mounted in the corner, no longer a tool of surveillance, but a reminder of how their story began. The red recording light blinked steadily, just like it had that first night when Ethan shared his dinner with a stranger. "Daddy," Lily tugged at his sleeve, pointing to the news camera. "Are they recording again?" Ethan smiled, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetheart. But this time, it's a good story." The sunlight streamed stronger through the windows, warming their faces and catching the dust motes in its golden beams, the light that never went out. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.